Hello, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Justin Leopard with Consordini.com, and today with another cello lesson, I'm going to talk a little bit about cello pricing, especially what you can expect as a beginner getting into it. So first, let's just do kind of a brief overview of the ranges of prices that cellos have up into past where we need to go today, but just so there's a framework. So a very cheap cello that doesn't really have any merit to it is going to be those ones $300 and below. Generally, a student cello is going to be more like $400 to $900. In that sort of range is a solid beginner cello. An intermediate cello is probably more in the range of $1,200 all the way up to $6,000, depending on how you consider intermediate. If you're a collegiate student, it's best to have an instrument that's between $6,000 and $20,000 or $25,000. And this is so you can keep progressing on all of the musical nuances. Past that, professional cellos for orchestra members, string quartet members, people like that, their cellos will range from $25,000 or $30,000 all the way up to $120,000. And beyond that, cellos can get up into, if they're very, very rare and made by a great maker, they can be worth millions. But these are very unique cases, and those cellos are always played by the most venerated world-class classical soloists alive. And there are some very cool cellos, some very cool histories. Certain people have played the same cello, certain other famous people. Like I think maybe Lynn Harrell has Jacqueline Dupre's old cello, things like that. So anyways, to get to pricing. So if you see a cello online and it's only like $300, you probably want to run away. And the reason why I say this, because ordinarily it is nice to be able to get things cheap. The reason I say this is that it'll actually make it more expensive for you in the long run. So a few things to keep in mind about why a cello below $300 wouldn't really be any good are that there are some components to the cello besides the body of the instrument that make a huge difference to it. For one is the bridge. And if you get a good bridge made by a fine luthier, that's going to be like $400. So already right there, you know that the bridge quality. And same thing goes with strings. A set of professional cello strings ranges from about $200 all the way up to some are $350. So again, that's already the budget, total budget. And when you factor in that they're including things like, usually like a very cheap bow, soft gig case that doesn't offer that much protection for the cello, you just realize that any one of the components that they've sold you, if you'd bought normally, is the price you paid. And so the price that you end up paying is that it'll all break, including the instrument itself. Sometimes they're not even able to be strung up because they're not properly fitted. But most of the time they just sound terrible unless you put hundreds more into upgrading them. So at that point, you're back to paying the price of an intermediate cello. So I always recommend going to a local violin shop specific, not something like Guitar Center, and seeing what cellos they have. And they're typically very reasonable with how they work with you on getting those cellos. Just really quick, I want to talk about what makes a good cello. When you look at a cello, you're looking at a basic shape with some strings on it, and it's easy to feel like there's a lot of haphazardness that can go into it. Sure, maybe the dimensions or the wood quality, but there's actually so much finesse that goes into these instruments that when you understand how much there is, you really start to understand why these instruments can be valued at such a high amount. So let's just start and talk about the wood itself. The best wood for cellos is going to be wood that came from cold climates. And this is one of the theories as to why older instruments have typically sounded better, is they just had access a few hundred years ago to wood that was grown in colder climates in Europe. And so the wood itself already is expensive, but you have to understand the craftsmanship involved, how they have studied for hundreds of years the exact dimensions of the wood. Now, sure, dimensions are something that are easily replicated by a machine, but actually every single shave that you make, that you have to do by hand to get these thin, thin pieces of wood that are going to stand the test of time requires a lot of knowledge. Even the glue that holds it together is different holding the front plate together than holding the back plate together. And if you are working with a cello and it's a certain type of wood, you need the mastered understanding to know what dimensions are likely going to sound the best. If you're making a cello for someone in particular, you can actually make it kind of for how they play. Strings are obviously very highly engineered. They're worth several $100s. The bridge, which is basically this, the spongy part that's receiving all the vibration and then sending it from the strings to the fingerboard, requires absolutely expert craftsmanship. Everything about this instrument is designed to precision. So what makes a good cello is a cello that has had all of these things masterfully and carefully taken into consideration when they're making it. So definitely something that gets very, very, very crazy, but also something that means you want to have something that is at least hitting the marks and not missing them. Okay. For those curious, this is a good cello. This is in the professional range. You do see a lot of nicks on it, which I'll just address. It's because sometimes often I've done experimental music and you end up hitting it. It's not that big of a deal. You can pay a couple $100s to have it fixed up. And these days I don't play that way quite so often, so no new nicks are being acquired, but I like the character. But this cello was made by a maker called Marco Maria Gastaldi. It's from 2006. Generally, old instruments are considered better, but that's not been so true in the last couple of decades. Modern makers have been figuring out how to make instruments a lot better. So when it comes to why we've been talking more about prices than about brands, if you go to Amazon, you'll see some different brands. And the problem with brands for cello is that it doesn't really make sense because cellos have makers. So a good cello, and even a lot of intermediate cellos, will actually have been made by someone. And there are many, many people who are qualified, but also, you can't just decide to do it. So one of the things about very cheap cellos or cellos that are branded, in the sense that they're, whatever Cecilio brand, those are factory cellos. So they're missing basically all of the nuance about how to actually make these instruments well. So it's hard to look out for like good and bad cello brands, but if you're going to reputable luthiers, and you can definitely look up reviews for them and like get to know them a little bit first, then they're going to have cellos that are priced appropriately, and you should be able to, you should try it out. And especially as you get plain cello, and maybe you want to start by just investing in a $500 beginner cello to see if you stick with it, but you're sticking with it and you realize, oh wow, yeah, I can see why this is a cheap cello. Then try out the different cellos. They're all very different and they work differently for different people. So it is one of those situations where also having some sort of on-site teacher or somebody who can help guide you a little bit in the beginning is going to be very helpful compared to going at it on your own. That being said, I'm going to link to some good cellos below, and also some brands that I would probably avoid. So hopefully that information is useful to you. Hopefully all of these videos are useful to you guys, and we hope to see you in the next video. Once again, I'm Justin Lepward with Consordini.com.